Oh man, don't! Where's the money going? 3.5 billion? What do you mean you spent it all? Guys, we've just found out, we've just got an update from LFG, that's Lunar Foundation Guard, on exactly where have the Bitcoin reserves gone. The $3.5 billion worth of Bitcoin which they had on their reserves, where has it gone? Is there any chance of UST and Luna holders getting any reimbursements? We're going to cover that off hot off the press. We've got the announcement from LFG. We're going to go through it, analyze it, and see what it means and where are the missing Bitcoins. We're going to find out right now. If you like my perspective, smash up the like buttons and subscribe. As always, if you like my perspective, check out the course member live streams, ijaz.uk/member to join our 3 times weekly course member live streams, fundamental analysis, technical analysis, and much more. But look, quick update on the market before we get into the LFG announcement. And you can see we're getting a little bit of rejection here at 31,000 on the hourly chart as expected. So we got a down day here on Bitcoin. But the slight positive news we've got is on the weekly chart, we managed to get our weekly close above the important 29,000. Now we've opened up the next weekly candle in the red, of course, but we managed to get that close on the previous weekly candle, which is a good sign, above 29,000, okay? So can we get that bounce off our 200 moving average? That's going to be the question. Can we get that bounce off that level, or are we going to head further to the downside? Now, I continue to hold my bias towards a 24,000 Bitcoin. I'd just rather be prepared than unprepared. If we manage to break through 31 and head towards 32, great. We can get ready for a little bit of a move to the upside and consolidation. If not, I want to make sure I'm prepared for the next support line, which comes back down at 24,000. So I want to make sure I've got my game plan clear for that. Now, that's not what we're here for. What we're here for today is what is going on with the LFG Bitcoin reserves. A lot of you guys, if you're holding Luna, if you're holding UST, or just in general, if you've been curious around this crazy event, which has really, captured everybody's mind in crypto and has had a huge effect, and all the big, influencers and people in crypto are talking about this, because this is a true watershed moment in crypto. We covered off yesterday exactly what happened. If you recall, from January to March, the LFG, which is the Lunar Foundation Guard, went ahead and started buying up Bitcoin, and they were going to buy up to $10 billion worth of Bitcoin. They got up to $3.5 billion of Bitcoin in their BTC reserves before the attack commenced on the weekend of, I think it was the 8th and 9th. Now, those reserves were there to defend the peg. That was the whole point of these reserves. And obviously, they had to go ahead and use some of this. But what we want to understand is where have they gone? Because they started off with 80,000 Bitcoins, okay, worth about $3.5 billion at the time. And they transferred 52 billion into Gemini, a centralized exchange, and 28,000 into Binance, a centralized exchange. Now, that on its own is not suspicious, right? They went into fully KYC'd centralized exchanges. Doesn't reap of anything suspicious, right? Doesn't make you too worried about something going on. But the issue is we've not heard back from them on what has happened and what has taken them so long. We're now a week into this just to tell us very transparently what happened to the Bitcoin. Where is it? Because we couldn't trace it thereafter. But finally, we've got this update today. Let's go through this in detail together. And the first thing we're going to focus on is they've given us a snapshot of what the reserves look like before the weekend of the attack. And you can see here 80,000 Bitcoins. And then we can see that they said from after May the 8th, they directly sold 26 million of Tether and 23 million of USDC. So call it 50 million total. They used that to buy UST to protect the peg. Okay, so that wipes out this initial part of the Tether and the USDC section of the reserves. That's all gone. Okay, we understand they spent it. They bought USDC as their first course of action. Now we still need to look into what happened to the Bitcoins. Now if we keep going down, we'll find out that on May 10th, UST had fallen to $0.75. The peg was broken, and they decided to then, move Bitcoin to the exchanges. So they sold the initial 33,206. Actually, wait, let's just go. Here you go. I want to go on this bit first. So 52,189. If you remember from yesterday's video, this 52,189 went to Binance. It went from a couple of different Lunar Foundation wallets. If you remember here, we had a few different Lunar Foundation wallets, and they transferred into Gemini, a new account on Gemini, okay? And now on this Gemini account, they then had the 52,189 Bitcoin. Now, what they're saying is that has all been spent apart from about 5,300 Bitcoin, which have been returned, okay? So in other words, an aggregate across this and this, they spent 1.5, they bought 1.5 billion USDT. Now, if we keep going, so that explains the 50,000, the 52,189 that went to Gemini. They're saying they spent it all pretty much, apart from 5,000 left. Now, if you then say, okay, keep going, they then say they sold 33,206 Bitcoin for another 1.1 billion of USD. So they're saying the bit that went to Binance, that was sold also, plus a little bit more. Okay, so what they're saying in essence is that what they ended up with is only 313 Bitcoin. Yes, 313 Bitcoin from 80,000. In other words, they've pretty much spent the lot. Now, what have they got to show for it? 1.8 billion of UST now in their reserves. But here's the problem. What's the UST worth? It's worth nothing. So if you go into the Luna Foundation reserves, you can take a look. Their whole reserves was as high as almost 4 billion at the peak, right? This included 3.5 billion roughly of Bitcoin. They had some Luna in there. They had some Avalanche, and they had some stable coins as well. Okay, that's where it's at. And now you can see where it's at. It's at 70 million. Why? Because what happens is the UST is worthless. The UST they own is only worth about, there you go. You can see it there. Okay, not a lot whatsoever. So, and that's the issue because, and that's even a generous point, right? Using 13 cents. If you go into, if we go into the latest peg price that I can see, if we look at it here on Coinbase, you're getting 7 cents, 8 cents on the dollar on the UST. So, in other words, there's not much left. There's not much left here in the reserves, but they're saying all assets will be returned to wallets tagged in the dashboard shortly. Okay, the foundation is looking to use its remaining assets to compensate remaining users of UST, smallest holders first. We are still debating through various distribution methods, updates to follow soon. Okay, so few things. Okay, let's assume we believe you went ahead and spent all of the Bitcoin to protect the peg. We want to see transaction IDs. This is really important. We want to see transaction IDs and receipts of every single transaction because that's going to tell us a lot. What that's going to tell us is, one, how well did they fight the peg? And two, were they just wasting the Bitcoin reserves when the battle was already lost? That's going to be really, really important because if they went early and they started defending the peg in an honest manner and in a noble attempt to protect the peg, that's one thing. If they were fighting with a lack of due care and it was slightly negligent, they were just spending the Bitcoin knowing that, you know, the depeg has happened, then that's a different occasion as well. So we want to see all the receipts for transparency. And I think that's the general theme right now. The reason people are getting upset is the lack of communication and the lack of transparency. And that continues on as a trend. Now, the question then remains is, what do we do with the remaining funds, right? Even, you know, as little as it is relative to what it was, we need a clear plan of what's to happen. And the first thing I want to cover off is Vitalik. So I want to cover off Vitalik in a second, but first I want to give context to this post from Persian Capital. So Persian Capital shared a really interesting tweet storm here. And he said there are 256,000 anchor wallets. The top 1,000 anchor wallets, which is 0.4% of all the wallets, own 82% of all UST. The poorest wallet in the top 1,000 has close to 1 million in UST. This is great news for UST and anchor depositors. Why? Let me explain. And then he goes through to explain. There's currently a proposal on the official Terra forum. The goal is to make people whole again, right? This is what Kwon keeps saying. He wants to make people whole again using Terra's $1.5 billion fund. But there are different ways of doing this. One way could be to return, say, 30 cents on each UST invested to every wallet. If you went to every 256,000 wallet, right, all of them, you could give everybody 30 cents for every dollar they had invested, okay? Now, what he's saying is, this way, Terra's funds would disproportionately flow to the rich whales who were holding most of the UST at the time of the depeg. And you'd only be making everyone just 30% whole. In reality, most people would still feel bitter. So let's explore the other way. So he goes, the second way is to prioritize smaller wallets, people who had a couple of thousand or more UST deposited in Anchor. If Terra just focused on the poorest 99.6% of wallets, then they could make this gigantic group 100% whole. Yes, you read that right. So, and this is, you know, this is understood, and this is one of the reasons one of the avenues that's being explored, is if you just cover off ignore the top 0.4%, you can make everybody else whole again. But if you want to include that top 0.4%, then everybody would only get 30 cents on the dollar. Now, there's probably a middle ground between them. Maybe don't ignore the top 0.4% completely, but focus more priority on the rest of the 99.6%, right? If you were to recoup up to 80%, let's say, for 0.6% of the wallets, and then the remainder 0.4, whatever's left, they can have it, then it's still better than nothing, right? That would still be a better way to look at it. Now, Vitalik responding to this tweet thread and said, who's the founder of Ethereum, strongly support this, coordinated sympathy and relief for the average UST smallholder who got told something dumb about 20% interest rates on the US dollar by an influencer, personal responsibility and sympathy for the wealthy. Yeah, and this is the point, right? We didn't cover off UST at all. I always said never put money there. 20% is too good to be true. But yeah, the point is that, you know, you've got to cover off the people that are most affected by this. And I think that makes sense. Some sort of a tiered approach to doing this would make complete sense. And in fact, the reason this is really powerful is if Kwon does want to do something in the future, he needs to regain trust. Okay, and we've seen his revival plan. We've covered that off in a video. I'll link that up here. That's his revival plan. But he's not going to do that without the trust of the community. So the first things first, any reserves he's got left, he needs to give it back to everybody. He needs to give that back to the community. And there's an argument now, and there's almost a civil war going on between Luna holders and UST holders, because the Luna's holders are saying, burn Luna. You went ahead and you minted so much Luna and you're affecting and diluting all our value, and we were trying to buy the dip. And then you've got the UST holders saying, hang on, you made a promise, you made a guarantee by the nature of a stable coin that one UST will always be redeemable for $1, and you failed us. So your money needs to come to us first. And I'd probably sit on the latter end of the fence. I think the stable coin needs to be recouped first, because when somebody invests in a stable coin, they don't invest on the premise that they're trying to invest for a return. When you buy Luna, you are trying to invest hoping for a 10x, 100x, or 200x. You're investing in a risky crypto. But as a stable coin, your mindset is that a stable is a stable coin. Now, my view on that, on top of that, is you should always invest in a stable coin knowing an element of risk. And this is why this approach is very important, because the top 0.4% of whale wallets are hugely sophisticated investors by definition. So those 0.4 investors will understand that there was a rehypothecation risk in the stable coins, and they knew there would have been some sort of a risk for them investing in Anchor Protocol, investing in stable coins. So they're slightly more sophisticated investors, and they wouldn't have got duped by it. But the smaller wallets could argue, I didn't know, I put my $1,000 in UST, I never expected to lose my life savings, and now I'm in pain. So this kind of a tiered approach does make for a better approach. And the other good thing is, if Kwon can build the loyalty back of the community, he can then go and try in the future restore a new project. And that's going to be important. If he wants to build a new project, he needs the community on side. I know he can get the VCs on side. VCs are used to losses, right? They're used to losses, and most times they invest in 10 different projects and they expect one to fail. So in that essence, you know, that's not going to be a big spook for those VC investors, and I'm pretty sure he can get those 0.4% back on board for a future project and maybe give them better incentives on the next ICO, right? But to be taking these funds and trying to make them whole again right now probably won't sit right with the community, and will probably make future projects for Kwon a little bit more difficult to launch. Now, the other thing I wanted to cover off was CZ weighed in. Okay, so CZ gave some important updates, and he said some interesting updates, full transparency, and lead to protect users. As it turns out, most UST pairs was 0 fee to begin with. So he was saying, because the question was, does he hold any UST? I didn't know, my team had to tell me, so not much UST there. Binance received 15 million Luna. At the peak, it was worth $1.6 billion US dollars as part of the initial $3 million. This dates back to when CZ invested in Luna in 2018. So this is before UST existed. It was just a layer 0 blockchain at the time. Binance invested $3 million, and so therefore he held the Luna, and he's never moved or sold. On the same address, we have about 12 million UST from staking over time, also never moved or sold. Now the important bit, to lead by example on protecting users, Binance would let this go and ask the Terra project team to compensate the retail users first. Binance last, if ever, okay? And I think this is really important. This is a really nice approach from CZ, and it'll probably be very noble if we can see other whales doing the same, because of the 0.4% we're talking about, the top 1,000 wallets which hold, let's just go back to, I think it was, what percent was it? So they own 82% of all UST in the top 1,000. I bet if you went in, you know, just using the Pareto efficiency rule, right? If you took the top 20% of those wallets, so the top 200 wallets of those 1,000 will probably hold 80% of the 80%, right? So you're going to get 60% of all UST there, which could be pardoned as a very noble gesture just from 200 people to make the rest of the 256,000 people whole again. So that'll be really nice. And CZ set the precedent here to say, look, I'll be the first. I hold 12 million UST. And I'm happy to let that go to protect users first. So really nice gesture, and it makes sense. I think this is the kind of thing when you've got ultra whales, people like CZ, other big whales who are in crypto, who know the risks inherently in rehypothecation. They have more access to knowledge, more access to networks where they know what's going on. Chances are the top 0.4% of the wallets know Do Kwon closely. They have a connection, they have a relationship, they can invest in his next project, get better terms. Go and make the average layperson whole again with any fund you've got. That way you can then get to zero. You know you've done your best for the community, liquidate, and move on to your next project, raise some funds, go do whatever you want after a little bit of a break. No doubt Do Kwon will do that. There's no keeping him down. He's charismatic, he's smart, as long as there doesn't seem to be anything nefarious going on, which, by the way, there's a lot of people who still feel stuff is, nefarious things are going on. They still think it's a Ponzi, they still think it's a scam. We need more communication around that. We need more communication around that because it's not great, okay? So we do want to see that. And to wrap this up, if you look at CZ here, he's saying the exact same thing. In this regard, I'd like to see more transparency from them, much more, including specific on-chain transaction IDs of all the funds. Relying on third-party analysis is not sufficient or accurate. This is the first thing that should have happened. And this is what's my pet peeve in this whole thing right now, is we're now a week into this, and the team have not come out on this point. You owe it to the community to do this. So that's why, as much as I disagree with some of the comments going around, Do Kwon should be in jail, he's a Ponzi scam, you're going to incite this, you're going to invite people to talk like this. There's no point us denouncing it when you've not given us data to the contrary. If you give us clear data to the contrary and not just spoon feed us like you've just done now with this tweet, clear transaction IDs, clear receipts of everything that's going on, what happened, document it all quickly. We don't have 2 months to wait for this. You know what's going to happen. People are going to start to turn against you. You're going to damage your trust even more. Just get out there with the facts, share it, and that will stop, like CZ is saying, falsehood circulating in crypto. Really, really important. Okay, there you go, guys. That's what's happened to the reserves of Luna Foundation Guard. Apparently, they've all been spent. There's not much left there. They've got 1.8 billion of UST, which is obviously not worth much right now. They've got a tiny 800 bit of Bitcoin, but now they've got to go and figure out how the initial fund they've got, how can they go and reimburse the community? And it definitely seems like a more split method where you focus on the smaller wallets versus the whale wallets. Is the way that people are going to want to move forward. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and this breakdown. As always, if you like this type of content, smash up the like and subscribe. As always, if you appreciate my perspective, then consider joining the course member live streams, ijaz.uk/member. Those are 3 times weekly course member live streams where you get to jump on a call with us, and it's just members only. We'll do it 3 times a week. We'll cover technical analysis. We'll cover fundamental analysis. You can bring your favorite tokens for us to analyze. We can critique your portfolio. We talk about the macroeconomics, what I'm doing in the market, my mindset, psychology, and the rest of it. So consider joining theirs. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.